There is something happening in your body right now. A pulse, a weight behind the eyes, a dull, constant pressure that you have already learned to label as tiredness, as stress, as lack of sleep, because that is what the world taught you to do with signals it cannot explain. But what if this signal is none of those things? What if this message that your body sends repeatedly, with an insistence that no coffee and no distraction can silence for good, is something your mind was deliberately trained not to recognize? This video is not about motivation. It is not about another list of habits for you to try for 2 weeks and abandon. This video is about a reality that is etched into your DNA, which was deliberately buried by a system that cannot sustain you operating at your full capacity. And today, April 8th, something changes. Not because the date holds magic, but because you clicked here. And that click was no accident. This will make sense before the end of the video. If you are not yet subscribed to this channel, do it now before continuing, because what is coming in the next few months will require you to be here. That subscription button is not a formality. It is positioning. It is you saying, I chose to be where the frequency hits right. Now let us begin. The symptom no one names correctly. Have you ever been in a room full of people you know, people who should be your tribe, your circle, your rest, and yet felt a loneliness so dense it seemed physical? An absence of air that had nothing to do with the space. You were there, smiling at the right moment, answering what was expected, participating in the conversation about what everyone else was talking about. But inside there was a voice screaming in silence. This is not all. This cannot be all. I was made for something that is not here. This is not depression. It is not extreme introversion. It is not ingratitude for the relationships you have. The Federal Council of Psychology has been tracking, in clinical care data and mental health research, a growing phenomenon among Brazilian adults over 35, the persistent sensation of existential displacement, not of illness, but of mismatch. The intimate and uncomfortable perception that they were born for something greater, but live in a world that has no room for that something greater. A world that continuously offers spaces that are somehow too small. That family gathering on Sunday, where the conversation goes from gossip to complaining, and from complaining to football, and from football to silence. The dinner with work colleagues where you realize you are present but absent. The WhatsApp group that pings you 200 times a day with things that have nothing to do with what is happening inside you. And you are there, functioning, fulfilling, being what you need to be. But one layer below all that, there is a frequency that finds no receiver. A language you speak and no one around you hears. This is not madness, this is information. This mismatch you feel has a precise name and a specific cause. And no, the cause is not that you are too difficult, too sensitive, too demanding. The cause is the distance between what you were configured to be and what the world decided you should become. And there is a neurological and spiritual mechanism that keeps this distance in operation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without you noticing. Let us talk about it, because when you understand the mechanism, everything you are feeling will begin to make a different kind of sense. The frequency war happening inside your skull. This is where neuroscience and the spiritual meet in a way that can no longer be ignored. And I need you to follow this closely, because this is the point that changes everything. The human brain operates in different states of electrical frequency. These states are not metaphors, they are measurable, mappable, and they determine not only how you think, but who you believe you are. Neuroscience research conducted by groups linked to UNIFESP and the Department of Neurosciences at USP confirms what decades of electroencephalography studies had already established. The dominant frequency of your brain at any given moment is the filter through which all reality passes before being processed. In the theta state, between 4 and 8 Hz, the brain functions in deep access mode. It is the state of lucid dreaming, of intense intuition, of total absorption without a critical filter. It is the state in which a child learns their mother tongue without studying grammar, absorbing beliefs, identities, and possibilities like a porous sponge, without questioning, without resisting. Not by accident, about 98% of children up to 6 or 7 years old live predominantly in this state. Their minds are literally configured to receive, to record, to install deep programming. Around the age of 7, and pay attention because this is not a coincidence, this is synchronicity with the beginning of formal school structure, the brain begins to be conditioned for another state, beta, between 12 and 30 hertz, the state of analytical thought, of social vigilance, of image control, the state of what will others think, of is this safe or not, of should I or shouldn't I, the state of social survival disguised as adult rationality. Beta itself is not the problem. The problem is when low beta, the state of constant alert, endless rumination, and chronic stress that never shuts off, becomes the default mode of operation. And for an alarming portion of Brazilian adults, Fiocruz research on mental health and chronic stress shows exactly that. A nervous system locked in survival mode that was never deactivated because the environment never convincingly signaled that it was safe to relax. And that pulse behind the eyes? That constant pressure you label as tiredness. Here I must be honest with you. Persistent physical symptoms, pressure in the head, recurring pains, always deserve medical evaluation. Taking care of the body is not weakness. It is sovereignty. A king takes care of his armor. That said, when the physical is checked and the pressure continues, when the exams come back normal and the weight does not disappear, there is a dimension to this phenomenon that conventional medicine has no vocabulary to name. Because what may be happening is the tension between two operating systems, fighting for control of the same processor. One wants to survive within the rules the world established. The other wants to expand beyond every limit that was installed. One was placed in you by the system, the other was placed in you before you were born. And this tension has a physical sensation. You know it well. If you have made it this far in this video, it is because some part of you recognized this description. Not from the outside, from the inside. This is frequency recognition. What Hebrew says that your Bible cannot translate. There is a word in the original Hebrew that most Bible translations soften so much that it completely loses its impact, turning a declaration of raw power into something that sounds gentle and domestic. The word is chayil, in Hebrew, hayil. You find it in Proverbs 31, where almost every translation renders it as virtuous. A virtuous woman who can find. A soft word, almost passive. But chayil in the original Hebrew is anything but passive. Chayil means military strength, organized army, capacity for war, wealth conquered through courage and strategic action. It is the same word used in other biblical contexts to describe elite warriors, combat forces, men of valor who transform potential into real results. Chayil is not virtue in the conventional sense. It is installed capacity awaiting activation. And when the sacred text says you were made in a fearful and wonderful way, in Hebrew yar and pala, which literally mean that provokes reverence, and that is separate, distinct, impossible to categorize in the normal grid, it is not being poetic. It is being technical. It is describing an engineering specification, a model built to carry something specific that standard models cannot support. Now the second term, dynamis in Greek, the root of the word dynamite. But not the kind of power that explodes upon being touched, the kind that remains completely inert, harmless, without any visible manifestation, until the specific condition accesses it. In Acts 1:8, the text does not say you will build power. It says you will receive dynamis, like one who receives access to a repository that already existed before, that was kept available, waiting for the moment when the right frequency found it. Dynamis is the power that does not depend on external circumstances to exist. It already exists within you. What is missing is not construction. What is missing is unlocking. This changes the fundamental question. You are not here to build power from scratch. You are here to remove what was installed on top of the power that is already there. This distinction will matter greatly when we reach the protocol. The three giants who went through what you are going through. Before talking about the solution, and there is a concrete solution, I will not leave you stuck in the diagnosis, I need you to understand something about the pattern, because what you are experiencing is not an anomaly. It is not a sign that something went wrong. It is protocol. It is the specific path by which real capacity is formed. Joseph of Egypt. his father's favorite son carrying dreams with impossible clarity, visions that showed the future with a precision that his own brothers recognized and could not bear. A visionary capacity that was not learned, it was inhabited. And what happened to this power? It was not celebrated, it was used as a pretext for elimination. They threw Joseph into a pit, then they sold him. Then he ended up in a prison cell for a crime he did not commit. Years of absolute silence, of confinement without an exit date, of apparent forgetfulness by the God who had given the dreams. Have you ever felt thrown into a pit by someone who should have been safe? Have you ever been stuck in a situation that made no sense for the size of what you feel you carry? Have you ever waited for someone you helped to remember you, and forgetfulness arrived instead of reward? Joseph's isolation was not punishment. It was a pressure chamber. Diamonds do not form in a relaxed environment. They form under specific pressure for a determined time, in conditions that look like destruction, but are, in truth, formation. The point most sermons ignore about Joseph: when Pharaoh finally called him, Joseph did not need a warm-up. He did not ask for time to prepare. What was inside him was already mature. What the prison did was not create the capacity. It was to seal the character that would make that capacity sustainable throughout decades of exercise. When the call came for Joseph, it came from within a system that had imprisoned him. And he responded not with the frequency of trauma, but with the frequency of one who was ready. Now Deborah, one of the most radically unique figures in the entire sacred text, and one of the most consistently underestimated. She did not ask for the position. She did not run for leadership. She simply operated. She judged Israel under a palm tree, and people came to her because there was something there they could not find anywhere else. And in one of the most severe military crises in Israel's history, when no one else had the courage to act, when silence had settled where there should have been direction, Deborah simply said, "Go," and she went along. The phrase she said to Barak is too precise to be discarded. "I will surely go with you, but the glory of the journey will not be yours." Deborah was not threatening. She was declaring the natural order of things when the call is fulfilled with integrity and without hesitation. There is a level of clarity that does not need external permission to exist. There is an authority that does not seek validation because it already knows. What Deborah represents for you is this: there is a moment, and this moment does not arrive announced with trumpets. It does not arrive when you feel completely prepared. It does not arrive in the perfect conditions you are waiting for. When the authority you carried in silence must be exercised because the time has come. And when the time comes, the call does not ask if you are comfortable. And then Solomon, the son who received the instruction to build what his father had dreamed of but had not been able to achieve. And when God appeared to him in Gibeon, in the most consequential dream of his life, and said simply, "Ask what you want me to give you," Solomon did not ask for wealth. He did not ask for protection from enemies. He did not ask for longevity. He asked for chokmah, in Hebrew, wisdom in the sense of knowledge that transforms a situation into a solution, that navigates complexity with sovereignty, that not only knows what to do, but knows why. And the text records something that should stop us completely. It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. What pleases the Eternal is not that you ask for your problems to be removed. It is that you ask for the capacity to navigate what is before you with sovereignty intact. This is the structural difference between the mindset of the commoner, who asks to be spared from circumstances, and the mindset of the king, who asks to be equipped to cross through them. Three different figures, three different forms of isolation, of pressure, of waiting. One same pattern. The power was formed in silence before being expressed in public space. It makes sense, doesn't it? If you are enjoying what you are hearing, if this is naming something you carried without being able to articulate, leave a like now. This gesture is not about engagement numbers. It is your recognition that this frequency matters. And the algorithm needs to understand that this content needs to reach more people who are exactly where you were before pressing play. While your DNA has ancestral memory, let us deepen the science for a moment, because what comes next will change how you understand yourself. There is a field of molecular biology called epigenetics. In the last 20 years, researchers from institutions such as UNICAMP and groups linked to the neuroscience program at UFMG, have published studies confirming something that was intuitive for various spiritual traditions over millennia. The experiences your ancestors lived, the traumas, the triumphs, the surrenders of faith, the moments of authority exercised under impossible pressure, leave marks not only in the cultural memory passed from generation to generation, they leave marks in genetic expression. Genes that are activated or silenced by intense experiences can transmit these activation patterns to following generations. What this means for you in a concrete way: the feeling that you were once someone greater, the longing for an authority that seems ancient and familiar but that you have not lived in this life, the intuition that there is a record within you that was not generated by your personal experience, something older than you that carries a quality you did not learn but that you recognize when you access it. This has a biological substrate. You carry in your physiology the compression of generations of people who faced impossible situations and survived, who cried out in despair and were answered, who built something and left more than they took. You are not a blank slate. You are an entire text full of marginal notes written by previous generations, notes you have not yet completely learned to read, but that your physiology already processes all the time. And this hardware, this deep configuration of your system, is fundamentally incompatible with the software the world installed on top of it. Imagine a state-of-the-art processor being forced to run an operating system designed for a 1995 machine. The processor is not wrong, the system is obsolete, and the freezing you feel, the slowness, the sensation of being able to glimpse what you could do but not being able to execute it with the speed you feel you should have, that is systems incompatibility. It is not a hardware failure, it is software installed on the wrong hardware. The software installed in you by the world, beliefs of scarcity that were absorbed before you had the vocabulary to question them. A survival identity that learned that standing out too much is dangerous. Unconscious loyalty to the ceiling your parents and grandparents reached, because some part of you recorded that surpassing that ceiling might feel like betrayal. Fear of taking up too much space because, at some point in your history, someone was punished for not fitting in. The original hardware, child dunamis, and a third word that is perhaps the most strategic of all, yada yada in Hebrew. It is not intellectual knowledge, the kind you acquire by studying a subject from the outside in. Yada is embodied, intimate, experiential knowledge, the kind of knowledge that exists within you before external evidence confirms it is real. It is the word used to describe the knowledge of God, the intimacy of a couple, the certainty of the prophet before the fulfillment. Yada is knowing from the inside out, not from the outside in. And it is exactly this type of knowledge that the sacred text uses when it says, "You shall decree a thing, and it shall be established unto you." The decree that works is not the decree made by the voice while the mind is elsewhere. It is the decree born from Yada, from the embodied certainty that precedes the proof. This changes the entire practice, and that is what we are going to talk about now, the reactivation protocol. So far you have understood the diagnosis with precision. You have understood the structural cause. Now comes what you came looking for, the way back to what is already in you. There is no glamorous shortcut, but there is a path that has been confirmed both by contemplative traditions and, more recently, by cardiac biofeedback researchers at the HeartMath Institute, who documented the state of coherence, the alignment between heart rhythm and brain waves, as the access point for the deepest and most productive frequency states of the human brain. Coherence is not passive relaxation. It is an active state of internal synchronization where the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, and the heart operate in phase. In this state, intuition becomes more accessible, access to alpha and theta becomes more natural, and decisions come from a deeper place than chronic beta can reach. How do you get there? Not with 40 minutes of meditation that you don't have time to do, with something simpler and much more radical for those who live in constant alert mode. The first step is naming the state without identifying with it. When you feel that pressure, that pulse, that weight of not belonging, instead of drinking more coffee, scrolling through your phone feed, or trying to distract yourself with whatever appears, you stop. And you name it. I am in survival mode now. My system is on alert. This is a state. It is not a truth about who I am. Research in emotional regulation and affective neuroscience confirms that the act of precisely naming an emotional or physiological state activates regions of the prefrontal cortex that immediately begin to modulate the response of the limbic system. Naming the state is in itself an interruption of the loop. The second step is the bodily anchor. You are not going to leave chronic beta through willpower because willpower is generated by the same system that is stuck in beta. Trying to leave beta through mental force is like trying to lift yourself up by pulling your own hair. You will leave through the body. A long, controlled breath, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, activates the vagus nerve and sends a direct signal to the autonomic nervous system that the threat has passed. 3 cycles of this breathing pattern, done with deliberate awareness, begin to move the system toward alpha. And from alpha, theta becomes accessible. This is not Buddhist meditation. This is basic nervous system biology that you can use anywhere, in the work bathroom, in the parking lot before a difficult meeting, in the car after a conversation that left you feeling small. The third step is the decree with embodied intention. Here is where the spiritual and the neurological merge in a way that can no longer be separated. The effective decree, what the sacred text describes, what Solomon practiced before building, what Deborah exercised before setting out for battle, is not reciting words out loud while your mind is disbelieving elsewhere. It is a declaration that comes from the center, from Yada, from the place where you already know the result before the evidence. When you declare, I am made to carry this weight, this call is mine, I have what is necessary from Yada, not as an attempt to convince your brain of something you don't believe, but as an expression of what you already know from within, you are not making positive affirmations to trick the subconscious. You are accessing the chale that is already in the hardware and giving it a verbal expression that the body can anchor. The decree comes from the king, not from the commoner trying to feel like a king. The fourth step is the ecology of influence. Joseph at the bottom of the pit had no community, but when he reached the palace, he arrived surrounded by people who needed what he had. Deborah judged under a palm tree, and people came to her. She did not need to chase after those who were on the wrong frequency. Solomon built the temple with specialized craftsmen around him, each bringing a specific mastery to a work that none of them could achieve alone. There is a physical limit to how much you can maintain your expanded frequency when you are continuously immersed in environments that vibrate at the frequency of fear, scarcity, and cynicism. It is not about isolating yourself from those you love. It is about recognizing that just as you cannot maintain the temperature of a hot cup of tea in a room at 0 degrees, you cannot sustain the frequency of expansion if every conversation you have confirms that the world is small and the future is threatening. Take care of your ecology of influence with the same seriousness with which you take care of your body. Deliberately choose what enters your ears, your eyes, your conversation. This is not spiritual arrogance. It is conscious management of the operating system that was installed over hardware that deserves more than the garbage the world tried to run on it. Now I need you to do something practical. Go to the comments and write one word, decree, in capital letters. Just that. Because this act is not symbolic. It is the first practical expression of the Yada that this video is activating in you. You are using your voice to affirm something about yourself. You are exercising chayal in the smallest of gestures. This is the beginning. Decree. When power wakes up, the world reacts. I need to be honest with you about something that most motivational content avoids saying because it spoils the happy arc of the narrative. When you begin to operate from your real frequency, when chayal wakes up, when dunamis begins to flow, when you stop compressing yourself to fit into spaces that were never made for the size of what you are, not everyone around you is going to vibrate with that. Especially the people who got used to the compressed version of you. Especially the people who built a sense of relational identity around your incapacity or your need for them. There will be people who will call arrogance what is simply authority being exercised, who will call coldness what is, in truth, you stopping operating from the anxiety of pleasing, who will say, you've changed, as if it were an accusation, when in fact, you are finally stopping being what you never were. This is part of the process. It is not a sign that you made a mistake. It is evidence that something real is happening. Data Fola and social behavior research have documented that Brazilians over 35 who undergo significant identity changes, professional, spiritual, existential, frequently report resistance from their immediate environment before any external recognition. The environment that knows you in the previous version resists the new version, not because the new version is wrong, but because it requires the environment to also reconfigure itself. And it reconfigures those who are willing. Joseph left prison on a day that was like any other day for everyone around him, but it was the day of the turning point for him. It did not come with fanfare. It came with an urgent call, a direct question, and an opportunity that was only an opportunity because he had been formed to recognize it. And he responded from the frequency of one who was ready, not from the frequency of one who was comfortable. You are not going to know you are ready until you are called, but you can decide now at what frequency you will respond when the call arrives. Turn on the notification bell now, because the next video will continue exactly where this one ends, and it will be specific, technical, and necessary. We are going to talk about the 3 patterns of sabotage that go into operation exactly when Dunamis begins to awaken. The 3 mechanisms that were installed in you precisely for the moment when you begin to look dangerous to the status quo. This video will name these mechanisms in a way that you will never again confuse sabotage with humility. Turn on the bell to be here when it comes out. The decree that precedes the manifestation. Job 22:28, in the translation that preserves the strength of the original Hebrew, says, "You shall decree a thing, and it shall be established unto you, and light shall shine upon your ways." The word translated as decree in Hebrew is gaza, which literally means to cut, as one cuts a stone, as one separates what belongs on one side from what belongs on the other. It is not a wish sent to the universe waiting for a favorable response. It is a declaration with the surgical precision of one who knows what is true about themselves before external evidence confirms it. And there is one last word that needs to be in your vocabulary after today. Emunah, emvna, conventionally translated as faith, but which in the original Hebrew does not carry the sense of blind belief in something you are not sure of. Emunah means firmness, stability, the state of one who is so anchored in what they know that external oscillations do not change their internal north. The root of the word is in aman, to be firm, to be established, to be reliable. Emunah is the quality of the pillar, not of floating hope. The effective decree comes from gaza, from precision, and is sustained by emunah, by the firmness that does not depend on the environment to maintain itself. It is the declaration of a king who knows what is in his own spirit before any external mirror confirms it. And the paradox that the chosen must learn to sustain is this: you must act as if it were already true before you have the proof that it is. Not out of illusion, not out of self-deception, because yada, the embodied knowledge, is already there. The evidence has not yet arrived, but the reality already is, and the decree is the instrument by which internal reality begins to reorganize external circumstances. This is what differentiates the commoner from the king, not the throne, not the resources, not the IQ or the level of education, the level of internal conviction about who he is before any external proof confirms it, the capacity to operate from yada when the environment operates from beta, the willingness to decree with gaza when everyone around is waiting for permission. You were built with this hardware. This emunah is available to you, not as an achievement but as access, not as something to be earned, but as something to be unlocked. What changes today? Let us close what happened in this video, because what happened here was more than content. You understood that the mismatch you feel, the existential isolation, the non-belonging, the pressure you carry, is not a disorder, it is not weakness, it is not ingratitude. It is the creative tension between what you were configured to be and what the world tried to install on top of that configuration. You understood the mechanism, the frequency war between the chronic beta of survival and the theta of deep access, which is your natural state of operation. And you understood that this war has measurable physical, relational, and spiritual consequences. You saw the pattern in Joseph, in Deborah, and in Solomon, and recognized that the isolation, the pressure, and the silence you are experiencing are not punishment. They are a formation chamber. They are the specific pressure that transforms latent potential into capacity exercised with authority. You learned the vocabulary that your DNA already knew: Chayil, Dunamis, Yada, Gazar, Emuna. And you understood that these terms are not theological decoration, they are technical specifications of the system you carry. You received the protocol: name the state, anchor through the body, decree from Yada, take care of the ecology of influence. Now one thing remains. You are going to leave this video and the world is going to do exactly what it has always done. It is going to offer beta as the default. The phone will vibrate, the email will arrive, the bill will come due. Someone will say something that will test whether what you heard here truly landed or stayed only at the level of information. Someone will make a small comment about the size of your dreams. A situation will arise that will seem like proof that none of this is real. And at that exact moment, as small as a thought, as large as a trajectory, you are going to have a choice: to respond from chronic beta or from sovereign theta, to shrink back into what is familiar or to exercise the gaza that this video activated in you. Chosen is not a title you receive in a moment of revelation and carry forever. It is a frequency you sustain, moment after moment, decree after decree, decision after decision, especially when no external circumstance confirms that you are right to believe what you believe about yourself. You already have what you need, you always did. April 8th is the day you stop pretending you didn't know. If you know someone who is carrying this same weight without being able to name it, someone who feels they were born for something greater but is stuck in the cycle of survival, someone who has already given up trying to explain to others what they feel inside, send this video to that person now, not later. Now. Because sometimes the message that sets someone free arrives through your hands, and that can be your first practical decree after today, to be the channel through which someone receives what they need. See you in the next video, and I promise it will be necessary.